Welcome to Live with Laura. I'm your host, Laura Hettiger, and today I am investigating the investigator. Friends, you have seen her asking the hardest questions on TV, and today we are going to peel back the onion a little bit on what makes Lauren Trager Lauren Trager. This is going to be a really interesting conversation that I'm really looking forward to. After all, she is one of St. Louis's most respected and most feared journalists. So without further ado, the one, the only Lauren Trager.
What an introduction, Laura.
It is so true. Oh, girl, I had so much more that I could rattle off.
Well, thank you for having me here. This is so fun.
Do you truly mean that?
Well, obviously, I love talking to you. You know, like you and I get to chat at work all the time. I feel like we're buddies and friends. And so to do that here on this awesome show feels like a privilege. I will say, though, I don't love talking about myself. Like, I don't like being the story. That's my number one thing as a journalist is I don't like to make myself front and center. So that's going to be a little different for me. Normally, I'm on the other side in that chair, truly, literally, logistically, sometimes in that chair. So this is different.
It is different, but I appreciate your time. You literally came running up here because just going through our internal communication, you've already been tagged on so many different things that they want you to look into today. So giving us any of your time is very, very special.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. Let's talk about investigative reporting.
Sure.
What is the difference between a story and an investigation?
That is a great question. And like news itself, I think it's very subjective. Obviously, people feel like what makes a news story is a question that's an ever-evolving question. It's very different depending on your lens or your perspective. It's kind of the same with investigative reporting is the way that I look at it. In my role anyway, investigative reporting means I typically have a little bit more time, resources, ability to look a little bit deeper at something. So often that means I have submitted for public records requests. I have talked to multiple people, sometimes on the record, sometimes off the record. Hopefully I've gathered as much information as possible before we move forward on a story. But sometimes it could just be a deeper look at a topic that doesn't involve some of that. It's not about government corruption or I don't need public documents. It's just let's really take an issue and let's sit with it a little bit longer than we get on a quick turn day of story. So that's kind of how I look at it. It's investigative and in-depth reporting.
But it's also a full team effort,
Yes.
which I think is pretty unique.
It is, and we're lucky because like so many other aspects of local journalism, there have been eliminations in positions and sort of, redundancies that have kind of, there's less staff than there ever used to be. We are here at Channel 4 a little bit unique still that we do have a dedicated team. We have 2 on-air reporters that are on the I team and 2 full-time photographers. Mark, Noah Brooks, incredibly talented, not only photographers, but editors. I think a lot of times people don't think about that. Like, well, how did that graphic get made? We have graphic artists here, too, that we work with a lot. But to really make a story, not just like a newspaper story that you would read about, but a story that comes to life visually and with audio, it does take a team. And those photographers, editors are so talented, and I'm so lucky to work with them.
And they're lucky to work with you, too.
That's kind of you to say.
Something that has amazed me in working on the second floor where our newsroom is how many conversations I see you having with our bosses. Scott Diener just left in the last year. I would like to talk about just how much of a lens your pieces go through, and especially the fact that our boss is now one of your very close colleagues. Chris Nagus,
Yes.
a longtime investigator here at Channel 4, is now the news director. So how do you loop in management, and why is that so important, too, in your investigations?
Yeah, I mean, not to get too philosophical right off the bat here, but obviously one of my biggest concerns is just distrust in journalism. There has been a real erosion, and some of that is earned, I think, by the media in terms of how we communicate with the public about what we do and why we do that. I think the process is really important in journalism, but people may not realize that there are a lot of checks and balances in what we do, namely, first and foremost, a code of ethics. Secondarily, legal rights and responsibilities that we have. So first and foremost, we have to be fair. We have to be accurate. Those are like, the pillars of what we do. But how that is accomplished is often an ongoing conversation. And I say the number one thing that I appreciate here, and I hope it's like this at other places, is the ability to collaborate, not just with news managers, but with colleagues. Because there's a lot of times where you might have to gut check yourself to say, did I gather enough facts? Do I have enough facts? Am I being fair? Is this accurately representing what someone told me? Or do I need to go try and find an alternate perspective to that? Are we being balanced in the middle? How do we go about doing that? And explaining it to people also in ways that they can take in and understand. So there's so many conversations on those levels that happen all of the time. I really feel like it is my job. It's my duty. I have an absolute responsibility to hit those pillars and those marks. My ethics, my legal responsibilities, and then also making sure that I'm collaborating so that I'm gut checking myself. So that means a lot of manager meetings a lot of times because, as you mentioned, Chris has been through it just as much as I have. And he, has a wealth of experience and knowledge and knowing how to do that. He also answers, of course, to other folks as well who might make some decisions about, well, let's do it this way or let's do that instead. And those conversations, I'd much rather have them up front before a story airs than after the fact where we go, you know what, we may not have hit the mark on that. And that also happens too. And that's why I always appreciate feedback from the public or from my sources or from anyone else. Like I always want to hear from people to say, that was a good story or that story didn't hit the mark and here's why.
And I'm so glad that you are sharing how many steps it does go through because you hit the nail on the head. Media does get a lot of criticism. As you mentioned, some of it should be brought on ourselves, but a lot of people don't see just how many steps when it comes to these investigations. If you on a Monday received a big tip, you are not probably going to go to air with it unless you have every fact checked for a day or two.
Yeah, I mean, there's some investigations that we work on for weeks or months. Obviously, there's many investigations that I would like to take on, but we are, a small team. We only have so much capacity. There are things that happen, though, during the day that we might say this needs some investigative resources, and so we might turn something that day. Maybe there's breaking news, and we can add some additional context or information or dig a little bit deeper than our other crews are able to while they're out in the field gathering facts and things like that. But yeah, for the most part, and again, this is a unique position because a lot of times our day of reporters, they must turn every single day. They're out covering the news of the day. And so they have to do a lot of those very same things, fact check, fairness, balance, but on a very intense and accelerated time frame. And I really appreciate our crews, a lot of them who are doing it by themselves, also shooting and editing video. Shout out to you guys because that is also incredibly, incredibly hard. But in order for it to kind of have that investigative label, it should have gone a few steps further, and that means we have to do that. We have to corroborate. There's also been many times where I've gotten a tip, say on a Monday, and I've started working on it, and we feel that we don't have enough to move forward. There's been several stories that I can think of off the top of my head that have just had to hit either the back burner, I say sometimes, to wait until there's maybe more that comes forward, or that never do become stories.
Let's talk about how you get those sources and you get those tips.
Yeah. Well, I think any good journalist should have the ability to source. You did it as well. I mean, you were on the streets too, talking to everybody and their brother. And you hope that you build relationships with those sources in a very unique way. You're not friends with them. You can't cross a line into an unethical relationship. But I feel like it's important for sources that I have to still show them empathy and compassion and to show that I'm a real human being too and that I understand where they're coming from a lot of times. So you build a rapport with some. I certainly have also just cold called people and door knocked hundreds of thousands of times in my life, where I've just gone up to someone's door and said, hi, here's who I am, and here's what we're hoping to learn more about, and can you help me learn more about whatever thing we're investigating. We also have a pretty robust tip line type process. So you can email us, you can call us. I certainly have gotten lots of tips on social media, things like that. Again, we get so many more tips that I wish we had the opportunity to tell people's stories. We certainly ask for more people to come forward always, and also ask for grace sometimes when we are making tough decisions about what we are able to move forward on a story or not. And that's challenging, because I know a lot of times people are just really looking for help. And if we're unable to help them, that's something that weighs heavy on my heart sometimes.
I did want to get into that, because it is one thing to be a general assignment reporter and cover a story about the rising gas prices. Of course, that impacts everyone, and you really have empathy for families who are then deciding, do I fill up my gas tank or do I let the rent check slide this month? That's a really big thing. But yet you're getting people who are sometimes in the most difficult of situations. They've had the runaround so many times. Maybe something really, really bad has happened to a loved one or a family member, and they are turning to you because they trust you, and you're that last beacon of hope. That's a lot of responsibility that you then take on.
I think you say it so well, because you've been there too, right? I mean, I'm sure you remember what it's like when you are showing up often at someone's very worst day, the worst day. And a lot of times they don't want to see you there. A lot of times they do, because they are hoping that you will be able to accomplish something for them, whether that's resolution or even just awareness to something that, has happened to them. I never, ever take it for granted. I really don't. Because if you lose compassion or empathy in this job, as in life, as a human, you have lost it all. And so that is something that I think about a lot. It's something I lose sleep over, to be honest, because I think about how we hold that in our hands, though. And sometimes, speaking with media or telling your story publicly can be harder, can be re-traumatizing, can make things more difficult. You hope that it has a positive outcome for the people who entrust us with those stories, but I know that sometimes it doesn't. And certainly there are people on the other side of some of my investigations, and I think about them as well, the people who may be the subject of our investigations. And I don't stop thinking about them either, knowing that they have families or children or lives, and that they are human beings too, who also deserve compassion and empathy. A lot of times we think about that when we are approaching someone, for example, who we may be seeking accountability from them or seeking their side or their comment. It doesn't mean that they shouldn't be treated with respect or kindness. And that's how I approach it, is everyone is still a person in all of these scenarios, and they should be treated like that.
What's really interesting about you is you came to Channel 4 after 8 years in Little Rock.
Did your homework, Laura Hettiger.
I tried. You are from Michigan.
Yes.
So not a St. Louisan by birth, but definitely you now are.
Yes.
And what I love about your story is you came to Channel 4 as a general assignment reporter. You were here for a couple of years. I know you are huge on the bus story.
Yes.
The transfer student.
School buses, yes.
Please remind me what that was.
We did, right before I actually left for a little while doing general assignment, I had done a series of stories about the deterioration of first student buses and some safety issues and concerns that bus drivers were bringing forward, honestly, about the conditions of certain first student school buses. And that was really not the first time, but it really did implant in my brain that I really enjoy that investigative part of reporting. I've always loved journalism. I love storytelling and general assignment storytelling, but it was sort of when I was like, oh, I can really keep going and I can dig in and I can go deeper. But then I did. I left news for a little while and took a job in public relations at the St. Louis Circuit Attorney's Office, which was also a fascinating, wonderful experience. And I really appreciated my time there. I felt like it helped me just see the world from a different viewpoint as well, and learn new things. And then at the very same time that the then circuit attorney decided not to run again, and Channel 4 here had an investigative reporter position come open, it was sort of the intersection of those two things happening at the same time that made me think, okay, is the universe trying to tell me something? Maybe I should really give this investigative job a chance. And that was almost 11 years ago.
So 2015
Yes.
is when you came back?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so I think that timeline is a really good spot to take our first commercial break, because just in the next few years, one of the biggest investigations probably in Missouri state history happened with the governor eventually resigning. And this gal broke that story. So we are investigating the investigators, so eager to find out so much more from the one and only Lauren Trager. We'll be right back with more of Live with Laura. Welcome back to Live with Laura. I'm your host, Laura Hettiger, but today it should be called Live with Laura and Lauren, as I sit across from Lauren Trager. And Lauren, we are in our awesome podcasting room, a room you've gotten pretty comfortable with over the last few months.
Yes, we have just completed. Our podcast is over, but we did a sort of special project, a little side project. I called it a sabbatical, honestly, from my day job. But we did a podcast about DTF St. Louis. Which was a HBO show, a limited series. It was only 7 episodes, so it recently wrapped up on HBO. But we took that opportunity to say, hey, there's a big spotlight on St. Louis. Let's talk about some of the issues that this show brings up, not just St. Louis specific, but also just we kind of had some conversations like this just with some really interesting guests, a former detective, a sex therapist. The St. Louis Film Office came on and talked about why those types of shows are not shot here in St. Louis and how they want to kind of change that. So we got into some topics and had some adult conversations, very above board conversations. So on our show, the F stood for facts. I don't need to say on your show what DTF stands for everybody else, but on our show, the F stood for facts. So if you're just still watching that HBO show, all of our podcasts are still available, and would love for people to check it out still, even though it's over at the moment.
But talking to you off camera about it, you said it was kind of like a spark you didn't know you needed.
Well, I think we're all looking for different formats to inform people. And just like this, this is a great time to just sit down and let people actually speak. Again, with the daily news grind, sometimes our stories are a minute, 3 minutes, 4 minutes feels like a long time. To have 40 minutes or more, an unlimited, truly unlimited time in the digital space to really get in depth on issues was something that I just realized, I still love this because that's what we're all here for, is to learn and to grow and to have new things to think about. So it was a really great experience. Plus, I'm not a TV critic by any means. So shout out to Elliot Collins, who was our expert in that area. It was great to talk to him about the show. I did get very invested in the show itself, though, and watched every episode multiple times. So it was a fun, again, side gig, but I'm back to my full-time investigating now.
And one of the biggest full-time investigations happened in the winter of 2017 going into 2018. At the time, you had been back at Channel 4 for just a little bit more than 2 years. Please take us back to that time. What was going on, especially in the state of Missouri? What rumblings were you hearing?
Sure. Well, I had, of course, covered the Missouri gubernatorial primary. It was a pretty robust primary. There were 4 candidates in that race. Eric Greitens ultimately prevailed, of course, and became Missouri's governor. But even before the election, and then certainly when he took office, there was some tips that I started to receive. And I know that I was not alone in that. I believe that other members of the media had also heard of some issues of a variety, but one in specific regarding an extramarital affair that the governor had. And it was something that we felt as an organization that the voters and the public had, that should have the ability to know more about, if it were to be true and if it were to be corroborated, and that would be important information. So that was something that we did pursue, and we did break the governor's story in January of 2018.
The timing of breaking the story was interesting too. Will you take me back to early January?
Sure. We had been working on the story, obviously trying to go through our editorial process and our ethical process, and in the information gathering stage that we were in. We certainly knew some things at the time. We learned more after, and as it became, certainly a statewide story that almost every single media outlet was covering on a daily basis for months afterwards. So, there were things that we knew before we broke the story and much more that became apparent after we broke the story. But we did not feel that we had enough to move forward until the State of the State address, which was in January of 2018. We had reached out to the governor for comment at that time, and I was working very closely with the then news director, Scott Diener. We had started to put the story together, but we were not prepared to move forward until the governor essentially corroborated the biggest part of the story, which is that he had had an extramarital affair. He has repeatedly and forever since denied other allegations that were coming forward in some of the reporting, but he confirmed that part, and that was when we felt that we had enough to move forward on the story. And we, it was a major team effort to put the story together and then break it that very same night of the State address.
So let's get into the timeline of that actual day. You have been receiving tips now for months. The bulk of the story is done. The State of the State, I'm guessing, is delivered 7 p.m.
Correct.
Our nightly news goes on at 10. So does his office email you at 8? At 9? At 9:55? How does that all look in trying to get this on the air?
Yeah, I think that it was sort of one of those things that it was just reaching a pinnacle in some ways. I think there were a lot of people in Jefferson City who were talking about what was going on and whether or not we had a story and what the story was going to be. And he delivered the State of the State address. And if I recall correctly, it was after that he came, his office came forward. We had reached out for comment, but his office did provide a comment to us and to every other media outlet as well, confirming, again, just that one component that, taken in context of everything else that we gathered, we felt that was then the time that we had enough corroborated through our editorial process to move forward. Again, though, that meant in a very short time, we did have to finish the story, publish the story, do all of our process that we would normally do, but in a more compact time frame. And that was that night. Of course, subsequently after that, like I mentioned, there were days and then months where that is all we did as a team, is just sort of worked on that story and all of the developing tentacles that came from it. Obviously, he was ultimately indicted, and then there was many, many issues that came forward with the prosecutor who indicted him, and the investigation itself, and he ultimately resigned, and the criminal charge was dropped. So there were so many facets that came after that, but that was sort of that night. That was the point that we felt we did have enough to move forward.
To be fair, people do have affairs. Politicians have had affairs. What were the conversations to move forward with doing a story about that?
Great question, Laura. And it's actually a question that I get a lot still. I tend to talk to a lot of journalism students, and I've even spoken to some international journalists before, and a lot of them have that very same question. I think it is a very good question. Like so many things, news is evolving, and what people think is newsworthy, as I mentioned at the very top of this, is that maybe people would disagree that is newsworthy, that shouldn't be something in the public domain. I certainly understand why people would disagree. The layer that I think we felt was more important was there was a pretty specific allegation of, what could be considered a criminal issue, which was invasion of privacy. The word we used back then was blackmail, because of the allegation being that he took a picture of a person without her consent and threatened to use it against her. That we felt like was of news value to people who maybe voted for him or to the public in general. And again, so much has transpired since then. Obviously, there was The criminal case was dismissed. He's never been convicted of that. There was never a photo, as far as I'm aware, that was ever discovered. So that, I think could also change people's perspective on whether or not that would become newsworthy. But again, things transpired and ended up where they were. My job and my responsibility, I feel like, is always to the public and to trying to run down important pieces of information that are of news value.
And you continue to do that each and every day. A story that definitely stuck with me that you've done recently was about scalpels and different utensils being used in a hospital system that maybe were not cleaned as well as they should be. That was really, really scary and eye-opening as someone who, when she goes to the hospital, my loved ones do, want to make sure everything is safe. Will you please walk us through that recent investigation and the results that you've already gotten for potential patients?
I appreciate that. And again, thinking about how stories come forward, I really appreciate people who have the courage, the bravery, I don't even know how to describe it. It's incredible to me, whistleblowers who decide to come forward, because they put a lot on the line, a lot. And we know in this day and age, people are not supposed to talk to the media. They could get in trouble for talking to the media, be retaliated against. There's policies that they could be fired over for speaking to the media. So when someone comes forward, and that's what happened in that case, is we actually had multiple people who came forward to say there's an issue with sterile processing. Not with everybody, there's a lot of healthcare workers who are trying to do the very best job that they can and feel an absolute responsibility and duty to their patients, but they felt like they were being put in uncomfortable positions because of these tools potentially not being sterile or as sterile as they should be, contaminated, essentially. And I learned, again, I approach things from a place of total ignorance most of the time when I begin an investigation, because that's something I'd never thought about. If my loved one is having a surgery, how do the tools, are they all brand new tools? What kind of tools? You don't think about that stuff. And are they properly cleaned? You sort of assume that they are. So I learned a lot about sterile processing. I often say to people, just walk me through this, stop and explain everything to me from the very beginning, as if I know nothing, because I know nothing about it. So I appreciate the people that did that for us. Obviously, we were provided photos, again, corroborating evidence. We cannot just go on what somebody is saying, especially anonymously or something like that. We have to corroborate. We have to check every possible source that we can, including with, in this case, the hospital system, to verify what we're learning. But it is stuff like that again, I think as an organization, my managers and myself and every reporter feels a duty to say, is this something that the public should know about and should they be thinking about? Because maybe there's also some things they could do to protect themselves, that the onus is on all of us in all of these situations. So I appreciate you bringing that story up. I mean, those are the kinds of stories that I think are, again, very difficult for local news to take on in a day. You couldn't. You just couldn't. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to tell those kinds of stories over time with the proper resources and make sure we're doing it the right way.
And the right way is something that sticks out to me, because even as you're saying, you can't just go off what one person is saying. You need other people to back it up, and the pictures and truly patient stories too. Having someone come forward and say, my surgery was delayed because of this. But you also can't go on Facebook under Lauren Trager and say, I'm working on a story about these utensils that might not be clean. Did this happen to you?
Oh, I've done that, Laura.
But then does the hospital find out about it?
Yeah, I mean, again, look, I believe in the First Amendment also. People do have free speech rights. And I understand, again, the balance of their concerns and their fears and their right to privacy. Everyone has a balance of rights. So I am also very aware that, maybe people don't want to hear from an investigative reporter. And once someone says, go pound sand, Lauren Trager, I usually do. Especially a private citizen who just does not want to be a part of something. I understand that. But yeah, my job is to try to reach out to anyone and everyone and try to, as you said at the beginning of this too, peel every onion, every single layer. And that often means, yes, reaching out to people I don't know.
And getting them to open up to you, as we mentioned sometimes, about the most serious and sensitive thing that's ever happened to them. You have been recognized a lot for your investigations. Have a few numbers for you. 15 Emmy Awards, 6 Edward R. Murrow Awards, countless Missouri Broadcaster Association awards. And now you're up for a national Emmy?
That is correct.
What is the national Emmy story that you are in the running against every journalist basically in the country?
Well, thank you again for this laundry list. Obviously that's not the reason I do this stuff, but I do, appreciate it. I honestly feel so incredibly honored every time that I get a recognition like that, and it's a team effort. I will make this shout out real quick because I can. Never had a single Emmy until I started working with photojournalist Noah Brooks, who is incredibly talented as well and makes those stories come to life. The National Emmy is something that our team worked on. It's in a nomination. Let me make that clear. So we're up for the award. We're up against other incredible journalists that I just look up to so much here in our company, to Gray Media, to really talented investigators, Brendan Keefe and Andy Parati, who are in Atlanta. They are amazing, and I am in awe of the work that they do. So they're going to win. I'm not going to win. But the story we are really proud of because we hope it brought some change. It had to do with pandemic-related funds that the city had received, and they were going onto private properties and putting money into attempting to stabilize those properties. But it became pretty apparent that there was a building inspector who had connections. Through our reporting, it became apparent. This was previously unknown, but we started reporting on this program. A building inspector had connections to some of the contractors and the construction companies. That building inspector has been just very recently indicted by the feds. We just spoke with homeowners, property owners who were, again, in very difficult situations, finding that they were, owing the city tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars for work that they did not consent to and that they felt was not good work at all also, and work also that in some cases didn't exist, like work that clearly had not been performed, yet they were on the hook for it. And we spoke to property owners who were just in tears and very upset. I can remember, because it was around Christmas time, many nights that I sat up at my home computer going through documents, records, liens, deeds, trying to kind of put all these pieces together. And I think the outcome of that story, again, other reporters were working on a very similar story, and shout out to those folks as well too. But when it kind of comes to what does the public need to know, this is your money, this is your tax dollars, also impacting your community and people, your neighbors and people that you know. So I'm proud of the story. Again, the program was ultimately paused. They are still reviewing it. There's ongoing audits and investigations still into the program, still unanswered questions that we're continuing to work on. But I'm very grateful to receive the recognition with the nomination for that series of stories.
I just think of the homeowners who received a notification suggesting that they owe tens of thousands of dollars to the city, and how devastating and overwhelming that would be, and how, oh my gosh, you would think the walls are just closing in around you.
And in some cases, we were the ones who informed the property owners that these liens had been placed on their properties, and they did not know until we contacted them and told them. Again, it's all well and good. We can, as a community and as a society, discuss and have conversations about where we want our taxpayer dollars spent and what programs are worthy. That's a separate conversation, but we need to make sure that there are safeguards, checks and balances within those systems to ensure that the money is being spent the way it should. It's going to the right people. And I think there were serious questions in those investigations, obviously leading to a criminal indictment, that wasn't happening the right way.
I've been a colleague of yours for a very long time, and I've already learned so much in the 40 minutes that we have had with Lauren Trager, and I know so many of you have too. We're going to take another commercial break. As we do this, I would encourage you to share this episode with anyone who is interested in journalism or who has ever wondered, how exactly does it work? Lauren is telling us every different facet of this amazing career that she has made, but more importantly, this calling that she is living out each and every day, getting results for people. You're watching Live with Laura. We'll be right back. We have a few more minutes together here with the one and only Lauren Trager. First Alert 4 investigates. Lauren, what's been exciting not only to watch your professional life evolve, I've also had a chance to watch your personal life evolve in your tenure here at Channel 4. You're now a mom of 2. How does being a mom impact your reporting and your investigating?
Guys, Laura is asking the hard questions here today. That's what's so fun is, like, I feel like you and I are always talking about mom stuff for the most part. Like, what wagon do you have, and what stroller, and how did you do this, and, you know, how did we potty train, you know, all the things. Gosh, it changes everything, right? I mean, I think anytime anybody becomes a parent, it just snaps everything into focus. When you are young and career ambitious, I think I was just like, well, it's just me, and so I'll put everything on the line. Certainly now I think about that very differently. I think about safety very differently with my kids, but I also think about them and their futures and, you know, what would I want someone to do for them in similar circumstances. I mean, it's hard to put into words, honestly. It's the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. But it has sharpened both the joy of work and the hard sides of work. The balance is different. My fears are different. It really snaps everything into focus. That's the only way I can kind of say it.
And with one of the big investigations that you did as a general assignment reporter with the first student buses, at the time you were not a parent. Of course, you had empathy for any parent who was putting their children on that school bus. But now you really see the impact of so many other things on a very personal level.
Yeah, I think that's true. Again, I think the role of a journalist is to try to see other people's perspectives no matter what, and there will be perspectives I can never fully experience because I don't have that lens, and I'll always have that implicit bias because I only have my own lens and perspective. But as a journalist, you try to see everyone's perspective and try to understand, put yourself in as many people's shoes as you can. But yeah, certainly I think that as a mom now, again, I think about both of them all the time of what does their future look like? How would I protect them in certain situations? And also just appreciate life more too, because you kind of go, it's so precious. Every moment that we have here on this planet is incredible and awesome, and I'm grateful for every day of it. So that part is there too, of just like the laughter and the fun, and that work is still, at the end of the day, just work. It's a great job, and I love this job, but it is still my job, and my best job is at home. So that's something I keep in mind a lot.
But they obviously see what you do.
They don't watch my stuff.
But they know what you do. Has either of them said, "Mommy, I want to be a journalist when I grow up"?
No. Well, one still wants to be a K-pop demon hunter.
So do I.
So
I
there's
get it.
that. I agree. I'm like, more power to you. The other one said that they wanted to work at McDonald's the other day, which also I understand that's their favorite place currently. So yeah, it's funny because my husband and I don't let them watch the news, obviously. We're not there yet. We talk to them about, important real things, but most of the time they don't see me. they see a lot more of you. And they're like, there's Laura. I know Laura. Or they're like, there's Mr. Matt. I know Mr. Matt.
Or Mr. Steve during severe weather.
Oh, yes. Mr. Steve. We're really into tornadoes and all things severe weather. They're still constantly asking me, when can we go in the basement? Should we go in the basement? Do we need to go in the basement? So they listen to Steve and they take his advice. So, yeah, I think that they understand that, mommy's on TV and stuff, but for them, it's really not. It's not anything different. It's just kind of all they've ever known. The only thing I hope is that they see in the long run that that I do have a job that I love and that I feel fulfilled by and that I like going to work and I enjoy my job so much. I hope that's something that they will internalize for themselves someday.
And also realize how many people you have helped through what you do.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the part of it that is the public facing and the public service part is what I get the most reward out of, knowing that, yes, you mentioned it earlier and I was thinking about that. The number one thing that I love the most is when somebody just says, thank you for listening to me, because nobody else would listen to me. And I tried to get other people to listen to me, but thank you for just listening. If nothing else, thank you for listening. And I think that is a privilege that I love. So I hope they see that too, that there is a component of fellow human beings and being kind to them and the empathy and compassion part of it, that we can help others. And that is what we're here for.
Our industry is changing and evolving at a very, very rapid rate. Technology, AI, when people ask me, where do you see television news in the next 5 years? I secretly think, I don't know where it's going to be in the next 5 months. Even the fact that we're doing this right now at a major television station, I did not see in the last, couple of years.
Yeah.
So let's move forward 15 years. If your children come to you in 15 or 20 years and say, I do want to be a journalist, would you encourage them to follow that career path?
Absolutely. I can say that emphatically. I think, again, storytelling is inherent to the human experience, 100%. Whether that's, my first loves were fiction and novels, and then I got into narrative journalism on paper, and I started in newspapers. That's where I very started. So I think that the storytelling component of human life will always be there. I think the desire to connect with other people will always be there. So the component of journalism, that aspect of it, yes. The other parts, I do wonder, what is it going to look like? How is technology evolving? Again, I'm saddened that sometimes there's this idea that journalism isn't important in people's lives anymore, that facts are malleable and can be changed. I am worried about how people consume media, and that there isn't as much media literacy as there needs to be about where to get your information, what's a valid source, what's not. I also worry a little bit about apathy in the world, that people are just more distracted by a meme or a caricature of something and aren't as interested in getting real information. Those are things that would discourage me from telling them to do it, because I just don't know where we're going to be when it comes to what is the public's desire for that. Also, AI is also a component that I just don't know what their futures look like at all. It's kind of hard to picture that. But I have a lot of hope, too. I mean, I think that it's still, we're going to all figure it out, and it's, we're going to be fine.
Why does local journalism matter?
It matters more than ever because it's disappearing so quickly. I worry because there are fewer sources covering the school boards, covering the local council meetings, covering what's happening with your tax dollars. Taxes aren't stopping, yet we don't have people asking questions about where's your money going, how are you being protected. The press is the only profession named in the Constitution. It is right there in the First Amendment because it is so vital. And I truly believe this is not just Pollyanna, but I truly believe it is so vital to our democracy. And yet it's disappearing at a quick rate. So I think I lost your question on that. But what was the question?
Why does local journalism
So it matters more than ever because there's fewer sources of it. And again, no one knows a community better than the community itself. we see a lot of talking heads on national media. We all have a collective consciousness now of, oh, the president said this, or, oh, the CEO of Coldplay did that. You know, I mean, we all know what's happening in these broad brushstrokes, but we don't know what's happening at the local level as much as we used to. And I really appreciate the Facebook groups and the people who are still trying to make that happen and inform small communities. And when I say small communities, I mean like the community of the state of Missouri, the community of the city of St. Louis, the region, all these communities everywhere. I think we need local journalism more than ever, and support local journalism. I think that people forget that, you know, the ads frustrate you maybe when the pre-roll happens, but that is how we support local journalism. If you subscribe to a newspaper, that's how you're supporting journalism. So please continue to do that. That's what I would encourage people. It does matter. If you want to know what's happening in your hometown in ways that impact you maybe more than anything, local journalism matters.
And that's what I think. You mentioned the school board, or even I'm from a very small town. What happens at that city council meeting has such a bigger impact on the day-to-day lives of all of my loved ones than what the president said or the Coldplay concert, whatever that thing was.
Oh, I think I said Coldplay CEO, but yes, the concert. Yes.
But it's so true. And why then should people continue to contact you with their tips when they want something resolved?
And not just me, but any other local journalist. I think that it's important that you find the journalist that you trust and that, you know, or that you respect for whatever reason. Representation in local media and journalism in general matters a whole ton. So I wouldn't say just me, but if there is a journalist that you respect, ask the questions. If there's something that you have fear about or trepidation about, ask. And I'm always happy to say I will walk you through the process of what it would look like. If you want to have a story told, I will be very open and transparent with you about what I can do and what I cannot do for you. And I think that any journalist should do that if that's their duty to do that, is to be open and transparent. And I also will never begrudge anyone who says, you know what, I decided I don't want my story to go public. I understand that. I completely understand that feeling as well. So just reach out. Again, we're regular people too. Forgive me if I don't respond right away. I always appreciate when someone flags me again, because it's a lot of times just kind of hair on fire around here. So if you haven't heard back from me, reach back out and I will do my very best. But do say hello. We appreciate just hearing from people, and certainly would appreciate any additional tips, news information that you might have that you think is of news value.
We appreciate you being open and honest, and again, so giving of your time. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Laura. You're wonderful at this. This is a great format. Thank you so much.
It's been a lot of fun getting to know people so much better and different organizations that we can highlight this way. So much like Lauren just said, if there's someone you would like to see on this platform, you can send me an email, laura.hettiger@firstalertfor.com. Until next time, friends, thank you for listening, thank you for learning, and thank you for being Live with Laura.